Signal from the dead. The Galactic Council had not heard the name human spoken in over 1,000 years. The word itself had become a myth, a cautionary tale whispered among elder species about a race that burned bright, burned fast, and then burned out entirely. The Zethari cataloged them in their great archive under one simple entry: Homo sapiens. Status: extinct. Date of confirmed erasure: year 4211 of the Unified Galactic Calendar. So when Station Commander Valoran of the Keth 7 border outpost received a transmission on frequency 0, a channel reserved for dead civilizations, he assumed it was a malfunction. He ran 3 diagnostics. All clean. The signal persisted. This is the ISV Endurance, Registry Earth 7, requesting docking clearance at the nearest council station. We have been in transit for approximately 987 years. Please respond. Valoran's secondary heart stopped beating for a full 3 seconds. He played the message again and again. His translator core confirmed the language. Archaic English, a dead human tongue reconstructed perfectly. The voice was calm, almost unnervingly so. He sent the alert up the command chain in 17 seconds. A personal record. Within an hour, the Galactic Council Emergency Senate was convened on Thal Prime, 400 light-years away. Within 2 hours, a fleet of 12 observation vessels was dispatched to the edge of the Orion Nebula. Within 3 hours, panic was spreading through 7 star systems. Because it wasn't just any ship. The Endurance, the ISV Endurance was enormous. Not by Council standards, Council dreadnoughts dwarfed moons, but enormous for a species that had supposedly destroyed itself before mastering interstellar travel. She was a generation ship, built in the final years of Earth's United Space Authority, designed to carry 10,000 people at sublight speeds to a star called Proxima Centauri. That had been the plan anyway. What the Council sensors revealed instead was something that defied every assumption. The ship had been significantly modified, dozens of times judging by the layered hull signatures. Different materials. Different technologies. Some recognizable as early human engineering. Some completely unknown. Some frighteningly advanced. They built on the move, muttered Chief Science Officer Nara 9, her 8 crystalline eyes cycling through spectrums as she analyzed the scans from the observation deck. For almost 1,000 years they kept building. Kept adapting. The hull alone contains evidence of at least 43 distinct technological generations. How many are aboard? Asked Admiral Keth Suller, his mandibles tight with restrained anxiety. Nara 9 paused. Her scanners ran again. Life sign count is inconsistent. The readings suggest somewhere between 600,000 and 1 million individuals. Silence fell over the bridge like a physical weight. That ship launched with 10,000 people, Keth Suller said slowly. Yes, said Nara 9. They were very productive. The first voice. The Council insisted on a remote communication first. No docking. No physical contact. Protocol for potentially hostile unknowns, even if those unknowns were supposedly extinct. Admiral Keth Suller opened the channel himself, his translator running in real time. Vessel Endurance. This is Admiral Keth Suller of the Galactic Council Observation Fleet. Your transmission has been received. Be advised. The species identifying itself as human has been declared extinct by Council record for 991 standard years. Please identify your command authority and state your intentions. Pause. 4 seconds. Then a voice. Female, calm, with an accent that contained 900 years of linguistic drift layered beneath something old and formal. Admiral Keth Suller. This is Captain General Mara Chinvasquez of the Endurance Council, 32nd Generation Command. We are aware of our listed status in your archives. We would like to discuss a correction. A correction, the Admiral repeated. Yes. You marked us extinct based on the destruction of our planet of origin. Earth was destroyed, that part of your record is accurate. But the people of Earth had already left. We have been traveling for 987 years. We have had children, and their children have had children for 32 generations. We are not extinct, Admiral. We are simply delayed. Keth Suller looked at Nara 9. Nara 9 looked back. Neither spoke for a long moment. Delayed, he finally said. We apologize for any inconvenience, said Captain General Chinvasquez, and somehow, impossibly, she sounded like she meant it. We would like to register our species as active, reclaim our seat on the Galactic Council, and also, if it's not too much trouble, request fuel, water, and docking access for approximately 840,000 people. We've been in space for almost a millennium and some of us would very much like to stand on solid ground. On the bridge of the observation fleet flagship, Admiral Kethsuller of the fearsome Zethari Empire, a species that had never surrendered a battle in 400,000 years of recorded history, found himself utterly, completely, and thoroughly at a loss for words. The Council would take 9 days to formally respond. In that time, the Endurance simply waited at the border, patient and enormous, humming with a million lives lived entirely in the dark between stars. When the Council finally opened docking clearance, it was not because they had decided the humans were safe. It was because the alternative, refusing them, felt, somehow, far more dangerous. No one could quite explain why. But everyone felt it. The humans were back. And they had learned things in the dark that the Council had never imagined possible. The Grand Hall of 10,000 Species. Thal Prime was the political heart of the galaxy. Its capital city, Velmatsura, had taken 4,000 years to build and was still not finished. The Grand Council Hall rose a full kilometer above the planet's crystalline surface, a structure of living metal and bioluminescent stone that breathed and pulsed like a living organism. 10,000 species had representatives here. Or 9,999 until today. The human delegation arrived in a shuttle that was, by galactic standards, primitive. By human standards, it was a masterpiece of their 32nd generation of engineering, a vessel that could fold space in microincrements, adjust its own mass, and, according to the scans that every Council intelligence agency ran the moment it entered the atmosphere, contained enough military-grade energy containment to level a mid-sized city if detonated. The humans had not made any threats. They simply arrived, and the math was obvious to anyone who checked. Captain General Mara Chinvasquez stepped out first. She was tall by human standards, nearly 2 meters, with the kind of posture that suggested she had spent her entire life in low-gravity environments and compensated through pure stubbornness. Her hair was silver-white, worn loose. She was 53 years old, which in the 32nd generation of deep space humans meant she was considered in the prime of her career. She wore no weapons visibly. She smiled at everything. The Council's protocol demanded that new or returning species perform the gesture of submission, a ceremonial lowering of the primary sensory organ, translated across species as the bow, the head dip, the antenna fold. It was not optional. It had not been skipped in 6,000 years. Mara Chinvasquez walked to the center of the Grand Hall floor, looked up at the 10,000-member assembly arrayed in their ascending tiers, and nodded pleasantly, like she was greeting a neighbor. Precedent and pressure. The silence that followed was extraordinary. Councillor Preeter Zunhaleth, the 700-year-old Thal Prime head of protocol, rose to his full height of 4 meters and addressed the human delegation with barely controlled horror in his voice. Delegate Chinvasquez. The gesture of submission is required under Council Law 1.0.001, one of the founding laws of the Galactic Assembly. No species is exempt. No exception has ever been granted. We require compliance before this session can continue. Mara nodded again. I understand. And I want to be respectful of your traditions, Preeter. They clearly mean a great deal to you and to this assembly, and I genuinely have enormous respect for what you've built here. She paused. But I'm going to need a small clarification. Clarification. Zunhaleth's color shifted. In Thal physiology, a deep amber meant barely restrained fury. Yes. Council Law 1.0.001. I've read it. We've had 987 years to study Council Law, and we've studied it thoroughly. The law requires the gesture of submission from species petitioning for membership. But humans are not petitioning for membership. We are a founding signatory species. We signed the original charter in year 0 of the unified calendar. I have a certified copy. She produced a small data chip and held it up. Our membership was never rescinded. Our seat was never legally reassigned. It was vacated, administratively, based on an incorrect declaration of extinction. The law has a specific term for this: erroneous cessation. Under Article 7, subsection 12, erroneous cessation vacations are reinstated at the original rank and with full rights restored. Another silence. Longer this time. You. Zunhaleth began. We also have 987 years of back dues calculated and ready to pay in full, adjusted for compound interest at the standard rate, she continued pleasantly. It comes to a rather large number. We're happy to settle it in quantum fuel cells, which our engineers have been refining for about 4 centuries and which, per our own calculations, are roughly 60 times more efficient than anything currently on the Council market. We're told that's valuable. She smiled. Are we wrong? The vote. The emergency closed session lasted 48 hours. Mara Chinvasquez spent them in the human delegation suite, eating a breakfast food called instant oatmeal that had apparently been in continuous production aboard the Endurance for 900 years and reviewing briefing materials with the 7 other members of her team. The arguments inside the session were fierce. The Kethsolar bloc pushed for treating the humans as a new species, requiring full submission protocol, a probationary period and limited rights. The Nara Scientific Coalition was fascinated and cautious. The Merchant Guild, having received preliminary data on the human quantum fuel cells, had already sent 3 separate private messages to the human delegation asking about trade arrangements. The legal analysis was ultimately unambiguous. The humans were right. Their reading of Article 7 was correct. Their original charter signature was valid. Their membership had never been formally dissolved, only administratively suspended based on the incorrect assumption of extinction. To deny their reinstatement would require the Council to pass a new law, in real time, specifically designed to exclude one species, a move that legal scholars across a dozen civilizations immediately noted would set a catastrophic precedent. The vote was 4,711 to 5,288 in favor of full reinstatement. When they told Mara, she nodded. "Good," she said. "When do we start?" "You don't have any other reaction?" asked the young Thal protocol officer who delivered the news. Mara looked at him with an expression that was kind and, somehow, also ancient. "Son, my ancestors watched their planet die. My grandparents grew up in a ship with recycled air and artificial sunlight. My parents taught themselves to fold space using mathematics and trial and error, and a lot of people volunteering to test untested engines. My generation crossed the void and knocked on a door we weren't sure anyone would answer." She stood. "I expected we would win this vote. I prepared for us to win this vote. The only thing that surprises me is that it took 48 hours. We thought it would take 72. She picked up her jacket. "Now, someone said there's a cafeteria on level 4 that serves food from 40 different species. I've been alive 53 years and eaten 12 things. Take me there immediately." The protocol officer, who was 211 years old by the way, found himself jogging to keep up with her. The humans had been declared extinct for nearly a millennium. They had returned not as refugees, not as conquerors, but as something the galaxy had genuinely no framework for. People who had simply refused to stop existing, and who had used that time productively. The galaxy, slowly, was beginning to understand what that meant. The 32nd generation. The galaxy wanted to study the humans. 17 different scientific institutions filed formal research requests within the first month of the Endurance's arrival. They wanted biological samples, psychological profiles, cultural records, genetic analysis. They approached the request the way one might approach studying a fossil, with careful, clinical distance, as if the humans were artifacts rather than people. The humans agreed to a cultural exchange program instead. 12 researchers from 6 different species were invited aboard the Endurance for a period of 60 standard days. What they found was not what any of them expected. Dr. Saravel, a Thal xenobiologist, wrote in her research diary on day 3, "I made a fundamental error in my assumptions. I expected to find a struggling population, traumatized, resource-depleted, culturally frozen in the moment of their departure from Earth. What I found instead is a fully realized civilization. Not a fragment of humanity. Not a remnant. A people." The Endurance had libraries containing the collected knowledge of pre-departure Earth, yes, but also the accumulated knowledge of 32 generations born, raised, educated, and died entirely in deep space. They had philosophers whose entire school of thought was built around the experience of growing up without a sky. They had musicians who had never heard wind and composed entire symphonies about what they imagined it might sound like. They had engineers who had never trained in a university but had learned by maintaining, rebuilding, and reimagining every system on a ship that could not afford to fail. They had a word, void-born, that carried no sadness in it. It was simply what they were. People of the dark between stars. And they wore it like a crown. Memory as architecture. On day 11, Dr. Saravel was invited to attend what the humans called a memory ceremony. She expected a religious ritual. What she attended was something more like a structured storytelling event, held in the ship's largest common area, a vast, domed space they called the atrium, where bioluminescent panels mimicked stars with scientific precision, each one mapped to a real star visible from Earth on the date of departure. Thousands gathered. Multi-generational families sat together. Children who had never known gravity beyond the ship's rotation sat beside grandparents who had been born during the mid-voyage restructuring period, when the ship's entire social system had been reorganized following the great shortage of year 340. A woman stood at the center, Elderly, wrapped in a deep blue cloth, her voice amplified gently throughout the dome. She spoke in what Saravel's translator identified as a blend. Modern endurance common, laced with archaic English, laced with Mandarin Chinese, laced with Spanish, laced with 6 other languages that had fused over centuries into something entirely new. She spoke of earth. Not with grief, the ceremony was not for grief. With memory. Clinical, loving, detailed memory. She described the smell of rain on hot pavement, as recorded in the sensory archives. She described the weight of ocean water on a swimmer's body. She described the particular quality of light through autumn leaves. These things were preserved not as historical data but as lived truths, passed down with the deliberate care of people who understood that to forget was to let the world die twice. Dr. Saravel, who had lived 240 years and considered herself beyond surprise, wept. She was not sure why. She noted it in her diary and moved on. The question of home. On day 44 she sat with Captain General Chin Vasquez in the observation deck, a forward-facing room of transparent aluminium that looked out into open space. The nebula where they had stopped burned orange and violet in the distance. "Can I ask you something personal?" Saravel said. Mara nodded. "You can ask anything. We've had 1,000 years of questions with no one to answer them. Having someone to ask back is a luxury. Do your people want a planet? A home? A ground to stand on?" Mara was quiet for a long time. Long enough that Saravel thought she had overstepped. Then, "Some do. Genuinely. The ship is home, but it is a home that required generations of people to sacrifice normal lives for the goal of someday arriving somewhere. That debt is real. Those people deserve solid ground." She paused. "But the void-born, the ones who never knew anything but this, they don't experience it as deprivation. They experience the ship as home the way you experience your planet. Not a lack of something. Simply the world they have." "And you?" Mara smiled. It was not a sad smile but it was a deep one. "I have stood on 3 different planets in the last month for the first time in my life. Thal Prime, the station, the transit hub. Every time I look up and I cannot see the ship. I feel." She searched for the word. "Exposed. Like the roof is missing." She looked back at the stars. "But then I breathe the open air and I understand, on some level beneath language, why my ancestors built us to survive long enough to reach it." Saravel said nothing. She simply looked at the stars alongside a human, which was something no living creature in the galaxy had done in 1,000 years. Her final report, submitted to the Galactic Institute of Xenology, ran to 800 pages. The summary read, "The humans of the Endurance are not a diminished version of a lost species. They are a complete version of a species that evolved under conditions no other civilization has experienced. They are, in every meaningful sense of the term, something new. The galaxy would do well to listen more than it studies." The report was downloaded 9 million times in the first week of publication. It remains the most read xenological document in the last 3 centuries. The Seraph Incident. 3 months after the Endurance docked at Council Space, the Vakreen Empire declared war on the Leth Collective. This was not unusual. The Vakreen declared war roughly every 12 years and the Council's standard response was to send mediators, establish a ceasefire line, and wait for both sides to get bored. The process was tedious but effective. It had worked 47 times. It did not work on the 48th attempt because the Vakreen had, in the interim, developed a weapon the Council had not anticipated. A resonance device capable of destabilizing the tectonic plates of a planet from orbit. They demonstrated it on Leth Prime's second moon. The moon cracked cleanly in 2. The Leth Collective's military, faced with the extinction of their homeworld, did what any rational species would do. They agreed to the Vakreen's terms completely and immediately, and then they reached out to every other species in the Council and explained, with remarkable clarity, that what had just happened to them could happen to anyone. The Council Emergency Senate convened. The Vakreen, emboldened, immediately submitted a list of territorial demands. The Council had no response that didn't involve either capitulation or a war they were not certain they could win. 3 Council member species quietly began exploring separate peace agreements with the Vakreen. Panic, contained but real, moved through the halls of Velmatsura. On the 4th day of the crisis, the human delegation requested the floor. Commander Torres speaks. Commander Elias Torres was not the Captain General. He was the Endurance's Chief of Strategic Affairs, a position that, across 32 generations, had evolved from ship security officer into something considerably more sophisticated. He was 41 years old, quiet in the way of people who rarely needed to raise their voice to be heard, and he carried with him a data core containing 987 years of strategic analysis conducted by people who had nothing to do in the void between stars except think very hard about every possible problem they might face upon arrival. The Vikreen weapon is impressive, he began without preamble. Resonance-based tectonic destabilization is a technology we encountered theoretically about 300 years ago. We developed countermeasures. I can provide the technical specifications to Council science teams within the hour. He paused. But I want to address something more important than the weapon itself. He looked at the Vikreen delegation directly. They stared back with the cool confidence of species who had just cracked a moon. The Vikreen have demonstrated a capability that creates fear, Torres continued. That fear is designed to make the Council negotiate from a position of weakness. I want to explain why that strategy will not work, not because of anything the Council will do, but because of something I am about to say on behalf of 840,000 humans who have been given, after 1,000 years, a home to protect. He let that sit for a moment. We have had nothing to do for 987 years except learn. We have studied every war in recorded galactic history. We have run simulations of every major strategic conflict for the last 400 years as an intellectual exercise. We have developed technologies in isolation that the Council has not yet imagined, because when your species is alone in the void and survival is a daily engineering problem, you get very creative very fast. He folded his hands. We are not a military power. We are 840,000 civilians on a generation ship. But I want the Vikreen to understand something clearly. We remember what it is like to have our world destroyed. We remember it in our bones across 32 generations. And we will not watch it happen to anyone else. The deterrent. What happened next was classified for 11 years. The public record shows only that Commander Torres met privately with the Vikreen diplomatic envoys for 6 hours, and that at the end of those 6 hours, the Vikreen withdrew their territorial demands completely, agreed to a Council-supervised disarmament of the resonance weapon, and paid reparations to the Leth Collective in the largest voluntary settlement in Council history. There was no battle. Not a single shot was fired. 3 Vikreen warships that had been holding position near the Leth border quietly turned around and left. Speculation about what Torres had said, or shown, in that meeting ran wild for a decade. 3 separate Council intelligence agencies conducted investigations. All 3 reached the same conclusion: insufficient evidence. The Vikreen themselves refused to discuss it. The humans declined all interviews with a polite but absolute consistency. The only account came from Torres himself, in a private letter to Captain General Chinvesquez, written the night after the meeting. It was not declassified until 23 years later, and it read in part, I showed them the drive calculations. All of them. 900 years of iterative development on a propulsion system that we never got to test at full power because we were afraid of what it might do to nearby stellar objects. The Vikreen military chief ran the numbers himself. He sat very still for about 2 minutes. Then he asked me if we would be willing to share the technology. I told him that we share technology with friends. He asked what it would take to become friends. I told him to start by putting the moon back together. He laughed. I think it was because he knew I was serious. The moon obviously could not be put back together. But the Vikreen funded the construction of a new Leth habitat station at a cost of 3 times the moon's assessed value. It was named, at the Leth's request, after a human phrase they had encountered in the cultural exchange documents: second chance. The galaxy learned something important that day. The humans had not returned as warriors. They had returned as something more unsettling. People who understood, at a cellular level, the cost of losing everything, and who had therefore spent 1,000 years making absolutely certain they were never helpless again. Not because they wanted to fight. Because they remembered the alternative. The vote for ground. 6 months after the Endurance's arrival, the Council offered the humans a planet. This was not generosity, or not entirely. It was also strategy, and it was also guilt, and it was also the result of 12 different Council species submitting formal proposals, each trying to outdo one another for the honor of hosting humanity's new homeworld. The Merchant Guild submitted a proposal. The Thal submitted a proposal. Even the Vikreen, in what was widely interpreted as the most politically calculated apology in galactic history, submitted a proposal offering a full, inhabited world in their territory's edge. The humans debated for 31 days. Not about which planet to choose. They had made that decision within the first week, selecting Kepler 442b, a world identified in Earth's ancient astronomical databases over 1,000 years ago as potentially habitable, now confirmed perfect. They debated about something harder. Whether to go at all. The vote was not a vote of the Captain General or the Endurance Council. It was a vote of every human aboard the ship who had reached the age of 16. 812,344 votes cast. The result: 461,207 in favor of settlement. 351,137 for remaining aboard. And exactly 0 abstentions, because abstaining was not a concept that had survived 900 years of collective decision-making where every choice had real consequences. Captain General Vasquez read the results aloud to the assembled Senate, then added, "The 351,000 who voted to remain aboard the Endurance will do so. The ship will remain in service as a mobile station and trade vessel. We do not abandon the life that kept us alive." She paused. "We also do not refuse the life our ancestors built us to reach." First footfall. The descent to Kepler 442b, to New Earth, happened over 3 weeks in carefully organized waves. Medical teams went first, then engineers, then families with young children, then elders who had spent their entire lives waiting for this moment and who had privately agreed they were allowed to be emotional about it. Mara Vasquez went in the 23rd wave. Deliberately. She wanted to walk onto a world that her people had already touched, already begun to shape. She landed in a field of violet grass that moved in a wind she could not yet feel through her environment suit, under a sky she had spent a lifetime imagining. She walked 20 meters from the landing shuttle. She checked the atmospheric readings one more time, perfect, breathable, better than the recycled air she'd breathed her entire life. She reached up and unsealed her helmet. The air hit her face like something electric. It smelled of soil and something sweet she had no name for, and the particular cleanness of a world that had never been industrialized. She breathed it in slowly, with a precision and deliberateness that people who had grown up under open skies would never understand. The way you breathe when you know the air is precious because it has always, in your lived experience, been finite. Around her, hundreds of other humans were doing the same. Some were crying. Some were laughing. Some were standing very still with their eyes closed. A few were already crouching down to touch the violet grass with their bare hands, marveling at the texture of something that had grown in actual sunlight. Mara sat down on the ground. Just sat, cross-legged, in the field. The sky above her was the wrong shade, not Earth's blue but a softer, silver-tinted blue that was somehow lovelier for being unexpected. 2 moons were visible near the horizon even in the daylight. She sat there for 45 minutes. Her aide eventually came to find her. "Captain General, the council representatives are ready to begin the formal settlement ceremony." 5 more minutes, she said. Her aide, who had also just arrived on the planet for the first time in his life, sat down next to her. They sat together in the violet grass under the silver-blue sky, and neither of them said anything for exactly 5 more minutes. What they left behind, what they brought. The settlement ceremony was held at the site that would become New Earth's first city. Representatives of 40 species attended in person. The Galactic Council's formal declaration was read aloud in 17 languages, reinstating humanity as a full-member species and recognizing Kepler 442b as a sovereign human world under the same protections afforded to all Council member homeworlds. Captain General Vasquez gave a speech. It was not the speech the Council expected. They expected something triumphant. Something about survival and resilience and the indomitable human spirit. She gave them something quieter. "We left Earth in the last hours before it was destroyed," she said. "We left with 10,000 people and everything they could carry and the knowledge that they might never arrive anywhere. The people who built the Endurance, who launched it, who aimed it at a star and trusted their children and their children's children to maintain it, they did not do this for glory. They did it because they believed that the future was worth the cost of reaching it. 32 generations of people were born in the dark. They never chose it. They inherited it. And what they did with that inheritance, what they built, what they learned, who they became, is the truest thing I know about humanity. We did not survive because we are special. We survived because we refused, across 1,000 years and 32 generations, to decide that surviving wasn't worth the effort." She paused. The violet grass moved in the wind around the assembled crowd. "We are home now. But we did not leave the dark behind. The dark taught us things the light cannot. We carry it with us. The patience, the precision, the absolute refusal to waste anything, time, energy, knowledge, life. We are grateful for this world. We are grateful for this sky. And we are grateful to every species here who received us with curiosity instead of fear." She looked out at the crowd, human and alien alike, standing together on a world that had been waiting for 1,000 years to be named. "We are calling this world New Earth. Not because we are forgetting the old one, we will never forget, but because the word Earth means ground. It means the substance beneath your feet. It means the place where things grow. She smiled, and it was the realest smile anyone had seen on her face. This is where we grow now. The city they built was called First Light. Within a generation, it grew to 1 million inhabitants. Within 2 generations, it had universities, hospitals, parks, a concert hall, and a museum whose largest exhibit was a recreation of the inside of the Endurance, not as it had looked at departure, but as it had looked in its last active generation, in all its modified, layered, impossibly complicated beauty. So the children of New Earth would know what home had looked like before home had a sky. The Endurance itself remained in service for another 300 years. When it was finally retired, it was not dismantled. It was placed in orbit around New Earth, where it remains today, a moon made by human hands, a reminder of the longest journey ever taken, visible every clear night from the surface below. The children of New Earth grow up looking at 2 moons. One was there before they arrived. One they built, across 1,000 years of darkness, with their own hands. They are proud of both.